Hey there, Prof. Aram here, and in this video I'm going to go over some of the shortcomings of the internal rate of return. So let's get to it. As we already discussed in the previous video, IRR is a very interesting and appealing measure because it just gives you a rate of return based on the cash flows of the project. And it's very simple to communicate that with your investors or with the employees. Also, another advantage is that if the IRR is high enough, you don't need to estimate the required rate of return, which is often a very difficult task. So why can't we use IRR for all the situations? The reason is that sometimes there might be a conflict between NPV and IRR. NPV and IRR, as I mentioned before, are compatible or generally agree with each other for most decisions, but there are some exceptions. When you have non-conventional cash flows, meaning that when cash flow signs change more than once, or when you have mutually exclusive projects where the initial investments are substantially different or the timing of the cash flows are substantially different, then IRR and NPV might not agree. So let's look at these scenarios. The first one is when you have non-conventional cash flows. So first of all, what is a conventional cash flow? A conventional cash flow is when you have a cash outflow today or a cost of the project today and cash inflows in the future. A non-conventional cash flow is when you have, for example, a cash outflow today, some cash inflows in the future, and then another cash outflow, and then some cash inflows. It's not like a normal or a regular, the cash flows are not like a normal or regular project. When the cash flows change sign more than once, there is more than one IRR. In other words, like in a normal or conventional cash flow, you go from negative to positive once, and that's it. But in a non-conventional cash flow, you go from, like in this example, you go from negative to positive, and then positive to negative, and then negative to positive again. So we have two sign changes here. And in this situation, you're going to have more than one IRR. And when you solve the IRR in your calculator, of course, the calculator and Excel are optimizing. And as soon as they reach the first answer, they will stop and then ignore the second IRR. So let's look at an example to see what I mean. Here we have a situation where we have a strip mining project that requires $60 investment today, so cash outflow today. It returns $155 in year one, and then the mine is depleted in year two, so you need to invest more in your mine. So you have two sign changes from negative to positive and from positive to negative. So if we calculate the IRR of this project, like when we do it in the financial calculator, let's clear it first. So the project cost $60 today, and then we do 155 for year one, and then year two we'll have another cash outflow of $100, and then in this case when we calculate the IRR we get a 25% IRR. But let's see why that's problematic. When we do a trial and error and come up with the NPV profile of this project, remember NPV profile is when you calculate the NPV given different rates of return. So as you can see, in this situation, the NPV is 0 at 25%, the one that you just calculated, but it's also 0 at 33.33%. So we have two NPVs. Which one are we going to use? There is no right answer here. We can't really pick one because both of them make the NPV of the project equal to 0. So both of them are IRRs of the project, which doesn't make sense. We can't really make a decision using the information that we have. And the NPV profile, as you can see, at 25% turns to 0 and then again back to negative. So only between 25% and 33.3% you will have positive NPVs. That's why we can't use the IRR rule in a situation when we have non-conventional cash flows. The next shortcoming might come when we are evaluating mutually exclusive projects. So what do we mean by mutually exclusive projects? If you choose one, you can't choose the other. So for example, if you have a piece of land, like a corner lot, you can either build a gas station there or a small shopping mall. That means if you build the gas station, you can't do the other one. In a mutually exclusive project, you might get one answer from the NPV and another decision from the IRR. Normally, we choose the project with the higher NPV or with a higher IRR. But let's look at an example. Here we have two projects with different size of investment, 500 and 400. The first year cash flows are the same. The second year cash flow for project A is higher than the project B. And our discount rate is 10%. As you can see, both projects provide an IRR that is higher than 10%. So both of them are acceptable. Now we have to choose which one. If we are making a decision based on IRR, project B provides a higher return. But when we calculate the NPV using the 10% discount rate, we see that project A provides higher value, more value, $64 versus $60. In a situation like this, we might want to consider the NPV rule because it's more theoretically sound. And we can also find a rate that you would be indifferent between the two, meaning that the rate that makes the NPV equal to 0 for both of them. And to do that, we can calculate the crossover rate, which means we find the difference between the cash flows of the project. You can do A minus B or B minus A, but it doesn't really matter, but you need to be consistent. So A minus B will give you $100 cost today and $0 cash flow in year one, and then $125 in cash flow year two. And if we calculate the rate of return or the IRR of this incremental cash flow, so $100, the incremental cash flow today, 0 is the incremental cash flow in year one. And for year two, we have $125. The IRR is going to be 11.8%. 11.8% is a rate at which we are indifferent between project A and B. In other words, at this 11.8%, the crossover rate, these two projects provide the same NPV and you're indifferent between them. But since our discount rate is 10%, we are preferring project A because it provides a higher rate of a higher NPV. If the rate was 15%, for example, then project B would have a higher NPV. So whenever there is a conflict between the NPV and IRR, we are going to side with NPV. NPV directly measures the increase in value to the firm, and whenever there is a conflict between them, we should always use NPV, right? I hope you find this video useful, and thanks for watching.